Have you ever wondered what could happen if one simple decision, a moment of desperation, or maybe just a wild dare, led to something far greater than you ever imagined? Like, really greater? Imagine this. A billionaire CEO, polished, powerful, totally in control, hires a woman just to play his date at a high-stakes business event. Nothing emotional, just a transaction. Clean, professional, temporary, or so he thought. But what started as a paid evening turned into an addiction he couldn't escape. Not to power, not to success. He had all that, but to her. And now, he can't even make it through a single day without hearing her voice, without feeling her presence, without craving the one thing money can't buy, her love. You came to this video because something in that title pulled you in, and let me promise you this. The mystery you're here for, the question burning in your mind right now, it will be answered. But what you're about to hear is not just a love story. It's a story about identity, value, trust, and a strange way life can flip everything upside down in a matter of seconds. Now, before we dive in, I want you to do one thing. Breathe. Yes, really breathe. Because the emotional roller coaster you're about to take is going to leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about power, love, and human connection. And you're not just watching this story. You're going to feel it. I'm talking heart racing, palms sweating, and that quiet little whisper in your chest asking, what would I do if this happened to me? That's the magic we're building right here. So stay with me. Don't skip. Don't click away. Because what begins as a paid date becomes a life-altering choice. One that shatters past wounds, reveals dark secrets, and ultimately transforms two completely different lives into one deeply connected destiny. Let's set the stage. You're about to meet Ethan Hayes. Think tall, magnetic, sharp-jawed, and always dressed in tailored charcoal suits that scream authority. Ethan is the kind of man who doesn't take no for an answer, not from clients, not from competition, not even from the mirror staring back at him each morning. He's the founder and CEO of one of New York's fastest-rising tech empires, valued at billions, feared in boardrooms, respected on Wall Street. But behind all the headlines and financial success, Ethan hides something, an emptiness, a gnawing, quiet ache that no spreadsheet can solve and no acquisition can bury. A man who has everything, yet somehow has nothing real. Then there's her, Calla James. She's not what you expect. She isn't some Instagram-perfect model plucked from the glamour scene. No, Calla is real, smart, witty, beautiful, yes, but not in that overproduced, artificial way. She's got fire. The kind of woman who walks into a room and somehow owns the space, even if no one notices her right away. She's not rich. In fact, she's barely making rent, working 3 jobs, dodging student loan calls, and taking care of her little brother after their parents passed in a car accident. Life hasn't been fair to her, but she's still standing, still laughing, still fighting. And that strength, that's exactly what caught Ethan's eye the night he accidentally met her. But we'll get to that. Now imagine these two worlds colliding. Billionaire perfection and struggling authenticity. A man trapped by power. A woman trying to survive. When Ethan offers Calla a deal, 10 grand to be his date at a corporate gala, she almost laughs in his face. But then reality hits. $10,000 would pay her rent for a year. It would put her brother in a better school. It would give her a moment to breathe. So she says yes, and that one yes changes everything. But here's where it gets interesting. And trust me, this isn't your typical rags to riches romance. Calla doesn't fall head over heels. She doesn't swoon at his wealth. In fact, she challenges him. She sees through the bravado. She calls him out on his arrogance. And instead of pushing her away, Ethan leans in. He finds himself craving her truth, her perspective, her warmth. What begins as an act, a performance in front of investors, slowly unravels into something neither of them expected. And here's the real twist. Ethan isn't just hiring her for that one night. No, that night turns into a weekend, then a week, then a month. Suddenly, she's accompanying him to every high-profile meeting, every elite party, every closed-door negotiation. She becomes more than a date. She becomes his anchor, his reality check, The one person who isn't afraid to tell him when he's wrong. And for the first time in years, Ethan starts feeling human again. But nothing this powerful comes without risk. And trust me, the danger is coming. Because the more time they spend together, the more lines start to blur. His friends start to ask questions. His investors grow suspicious. And worse, Callah's world starts to spin. She's no longer invisible. Her name's in the tabloids. Strangers recognize her face. She's called a gold digger, a con artist, a manipulator. And suddenly, she's forced to ask herself, was this all just a game to him? Or did he really fall for me? The worst part? Ethan isn't giving her answers. Because he's too busy facing something darker, a secret buried deep in his past. One that could destroy everything. Still with me? Good. Because here's where it gets real. You're going to see something raw in this story. Something that mirrors your own life in ways you don't expect. This isn't just a fantasy. This is about identity. About knowing your worth in a world that constantly tries to put a price tag on people. About what happens when love and loyalty get tested by money, fame, and fear. So, I need you to keep watching. Don't scroll. Don't click away. Because the truth behind this fake relationship is going to shake you. The ending is not what you think it is. And the choice they have to make will leave you stunned. Right now, Ethan and Callah are standing at a crossroads. He's falling deeper than he's ever allowed himself to fall. She's questioning if she can trust him at all. And somewhere behind the glossy penthouse windows and flashing paparazzi cameras, something is brewing. A betrayal, a secret deal, a revelation that's going to turn everything upside down. But we're not there yet. First, we need to go back to the night of the gala. The first night Callah put on that silver dress and walked into a room full of billionaires, pretending to belong. The moment she locked eyes with Ethan across the ballroom. The first time he smiled, not that boardroom smirk, but a real, unguarded smile. It was the start of something neither of them could explain. And what happened after that? Let's just say you're not ready. So buckle in, grab a drink, turn off distractions, because you're about to witness a transformation, one that will pull you in and won't let go. This is a story about a man who thought he could buy control and a woman who proved he never really had it. A story about love that wasn't supposed to happen, a deal that was never meant to last, and a connection so real it broke all the rules. And just when you think you got it all figured out, there's a knock at the door. Someone from Ethan's past. Someone who knows exactly what he's hiding and is ready to destroy everything. To find out who it is and why everything is about to come crashing down, you'll have to keep watching. Because this is just the beginning. The night of the gala had seemed flawless on the surface. High-profile executives mingling with champagne in hand. Paparazzi flashes exploding like fireworks outside the velvet ropes, and Ethan Hayes, the tech tycoon himself, moving through the room like a king surveying his empire. At his side, Callah James had played the part to perfection, dressed in silver satin and wearing the kind of calm grace that couldn't be faked. She walked beside Ethan with quiet confidence, turning heads not because she tried to, but because she simply couldn't help it. The plan was simple. Impress a key investor, diffuse rumors about Ethan's personal life, and leave no room for doubts about a commitment to stability. After all, in the world of billion-dollar ventures and hostile takeovers, even love, real or not, was a business strategy. But beneath the perfect performance, something deeper was unraveling. Something neither of them dared speak out loud. Callah was starting to notice details that didn't match the public image of Ethan's life. Glances exchanged with certain guests. A woman who left as soon as Callah entered. A phone that kept buzzing with messages Ethan never answered in front of her. And then there was a name, Mara, spoken once too softly, but etched in a way Callah couldn't forget. For Ethan, everything had been running on a tight schedule. Launches, investor calls, mergers. His life was structured with the precision of a high-stakes chess game. Yet in the weeks leading up to the gala, things had begun to shift. His once unshakable team was cracking. His long-trusted advisor, Grant Holloway, had abruptly stepped down without offering a reason. Whispers of a data breach in one of the subsidiaries started making rounds online, trending on social media with tags like #TechScandal and #EthanHayesExposed. Ethan had denied everything, of course, calling it a smear campaign orchestrated by jealous competitors. But behind the scenes, he was pulling late nights, reviewing contracts, and calling in favors he hadn't used in years. And Calla, once just a pawn in his carefully arranged display, was now sitting quietly on the edge of this unraveling world, watching the cracks form in the walls he tried so hard to keep up. At first, Ethan had brushed it off when Calla asked him about the tension. He had that way of dodging questions without sounding evasive, giving her just enough to make her feel like she knew the answer, without ever actually confirming it. But Calla wasn't the same woman who had nervously taken the check that first night. She had learned to read him, and she had started to notice the way his jaw clenched every time he got a message from an unknown number. How his tone shifted when the subject of his ex-partners came up. How he never mentioned his family, not even once. She was falling for him, yes, but she was also waking up to a darker reality. There were people in his life she had never met, people who clearly didn't want her around, and one of them had left a note at her door the night after the gala. No name, just a warning, scribbled in cold black ink. He's not who you think he is. Walk away while you still can. That was the first time Calla truly questioned her place in his world. Until that moment, it felt like a strange fairy tale, a little messy, a little dangerous, but somehow beautiful in its own way. But that note changed everything. It wasn't just about business or appearances anymore. Someone out there didn't want her in Ethan's life, and they weren't afraid to make it known. But who? Could it have been one of Ethan's competitors? A jealous ex-girlfriend? One of those shadowy board members whose eyes never quite met hers during introductions? Or worse, someone on the inside? The deeper Calla looked, the more tangled it all became. There was a mysterious woman at the gala, blonde, icy, and visibly unsettled when she saw Calla on Ethan's arm. She disappeared before anyone could introduce her. Then there was Devin Marks, Ethan's former co-founder, who had vanished from the company 2 years ago after a messy legal dispute no one wanted to talk about. And finally, there was Ethan's driver, Michael, always quiet, always polite, but somehow too observant, too present. The kind of man who sees everything but says nothing. Each of them could be behind the message. Each of them had motive. And the more Calla thought about it, the more she realized just how little she truly knew about Ethan's past. Ethan, meanwhile, had started acting differently. Though he tried to hide it, he canceled meetings, changed passwords, made calls behind closed doors. He was still affectionate with Calla, still charming in public, but there was a growing distance in his eyes. And sometimes, late at night, she'd catch him standing by the window of his penthouse, looking out over the city like a man at war with his own thoughts. She tried to ask him about it, but he always smiled and said it was nothing, that everything was under control. But even in his calmest reassurances, there was tension, like he was holding something back, protecting her from a truth he wasn't ready to share. Then came the invitation. A black envelope slid under Calla's apartment door while Ethan was away on a business trip. No return address, just a time, a place, and a single phrase. If you want the truth, come alone. The handwriting matched the note from before. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a summons. And Calla, torn between fear and curiosity, knew she had a decision to make. Ethan had promised her safety, promised her everything. But what if the real danger wasn't from the outside? What if it was him? Still, something inside her refused to believe he could be the villain. For all his flaws and secrets, Ethan had shown her a side of himself that felt real. The way he opened up after her brother's school recital. The nights they stayed in, just talking about dreams they'd never shared with anyone else. The moments when he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Could all of that have been a lie? That's the question burning in Calla's heart, and in yours. Because nothing in this story is what it seems. The CEO who paid for a company may not have been paying for her time at all. The woman who showed up at the gala, maybe more than just an ex. And the note? That might not have been a threat. It could be a rescue attempt. The game is shifting. The pieces are moving, and somewhere in the shadows, someone is about to make a move that changes everything. And just when Calla thinks she's ready to walk away, her phone rings. It's Ethan, but this time his voice isn't calm. It's tight, rushed, almost afraid. And all he says before the call drops is, "Don't go anywhere tonight. I think someone's watching you." Now she's wondering, who else knows she got the note? And more importantly, how far would someone go to keep the past buried? The answers are coming, but the cost of finding them? That might be more than either of them is prepared to pay. The next morning, the city felt colder, grayer, like something the air had shifted. Calla barely slept after Ethan's cryptic warning. She had replayed his voice over and over in her mind. Tense, sharp, unlike the version of him she thought she knew. He was scared, not for himself, but for her. That alone should have been enough to make her pause, to stay inside and wait for answers. But curiosity is a pull stronger than fear, and something inside her kept whispering that she was closer to the truth than ever before. So she left her apartment just after sunrise, clutching the black envelope in her coat pocket, determined to trace its origin. She didn't tell Ethan where she was going. She didn't tell anyone. It was a mistake she would soon regret. The address in the note led to an abandoned bookstore in Brooklyn. Shuttered windows, rusted signage, the kind of place people walk past without giving it a second glance. But inside, something didn't add up. The door was unlocked. The air was still. On the counter sat an envelope identical to the one she received before, but this one was already open. Inside, just one photograph. Ethan, standing beside an older man Calla didn't recognize, shaking hands in front of a private jet. Scribbled on the back of the photo were the words, "Find out who he is, then decide who you trust." It was supposed to be a lead, a clue, but before Calla could even process what she was looking at, a noise echoed from the back of the store. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, approaching. She turned, heart pounding, but saw nothing. No one. Still, something was wrong. That much she could feel. She grabbed the photo and rushed out the door, only to realize her phone was no longer in her bag. She'd had it when she left home. She was sure of it, but now it was gone, just like the stranger in the shadows. She flagged down a cab, feeling her panic rising, unsure whether to head back to her apartment or to Ethan's. Neither felt safe. When she arrived home, her apartment door was slightly open. Everything inside was untouched, except for the drawer where she kept the original note. It was empty. Whoever had been there hadn't taken anything of value. No jewelry, no electronics. Just a message. Just the evidence. That was the first time Calla realized she wasn't just being watched. She was being controlled. Her every move, every question, every instinct was being manipulated by someone who seemed to know what she was going to do before she did. And worst of all, Ethan still hadn't called her back. No message, no explanation, just silence. She considered going to the police, but what would she say? That a billionaire she was dating might be hiding something? That someone left her a warning note and then broke into her apartment to erase it? It sounded more like the plot of a conspiracy thriller than real life. But this was real, and it was getting more dangerous by the hour. In desperation, she reached out to the only other person she thought might help, Zara Bennett, Ethan's former publicist. She'd met her once at a launch event, a sharp, well-dressed woman who seemed to know more than she ever said. Calla found her number buried in the invite list from the gala and called, praying she'd pick up. To her surprise, Zara agreed to meet, on one condition. They speak in person and alone. When they met later that evening at a small cafe on the Lower East Side, Zara wasted no time with pleasantries. She didn't ask how Calla was. She didn't offer a smile. She simply slid a manila envelope across the table and said, "You don't know what you stepped into." Inside the envelope were surveillance photos, grainy, black and white stills taken weeks earlier. Some showed Ethan in boardrooms, others at high-end clubs, but the last one was the most disturbing. It showed Calla entering Ethan's penthouse building alone. The timestamp was from the week before they officially met, before he ever offered her the deal, before any of it should have been possible. Calla's hand shook as she stared at the photo, trying to make sense of it. Was it doctored, staged, or had someone been following her before she even knew she was a target? Zara leaned in, voice low, eyes sharp. "Ethan's not who you think he is," she said. "There are things you haven't seen, choices he made years ago that are catching up with him now. And if you stay in his world, they'll catch up with you too. She refused to explain further, claiming it was too risky. But before she left, she added something that chilled Calla to the bone. Don't trust anyone, especially the ones who offer you protection. Now nothing made sense. Calla returned to her apartment, locked the doors, and tried to piece it all together. Who was the man in the photo with Ethan? What was Zara trying to warn her about? And why did it feel like someone was pushing her towards something she wasn't ready to face? The more she tried to dig, the more the truth slipped through her fingers. Every time she found lead, it vanished. Every time she asked a question, the answers only led to more lies. And then, just when she thought she might be making progress, something even stranger happened. She received a package, no return address, no name. Inside was a flash drive and a single slip of paper that read, "You wanted the truth. Be careful what you wish for." When she plugged the drive into her laptop, a video began to play. Grainy footage. A hotel room. Ethan's voice, arguing with someone out of frame. The conversation was muffled, but one phrase rang out clearly and it froze her in place. If she finds out, everything's over. The video cut off suddenly, corrupted at the most critical point. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt was now planted deep in her heart. Calla didn't know who recorded it. She didn't know when it happened or who Ethan was speaking to. All she knew was that the man she was falling for had secrets. Real, dangerous secrets. And someone out there was determined to expose them. Or manipulate them. Or worse, use her as bait. But just as Calla reached for her phone to try Ethan one more time, a knock sounded at the door. Not forceful, not frantic, just a quiet, steady rhythm that echoed in the silence like a drumbeat of fate. She froze, heart pounding, because through the peephole, she could see someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone from her past. Someone who wasn't supposed to know where she lived. And as she opened the door, the words that came out of their mouth were the last thing she expected to hear. "You need to leave with me, right now. He's not the only one lying to you." Calla stood frozen in the doorway, her heart pounding against her ribcage like it was trying to escape. The person standing before her looked older than she remembered. Tired eyes, a deep scar across one cheek, hair slicked back in a way that made him look out of place in the city's glossy pace. But there was no denying who it was. Liam, her ex, her mistake, her secret. She hadn't seen him in over 3 years, not since the night everything fell apart between them. She'd buried that chapter of her life, locked it away so tightly she convinced herself it no longer existed. And yet here he was, uninvited, standing at her door with a look that said he knew something she didn't, something that mattered, something dangerous. Before she could ask why he was there or how he found her, he pulled her inside, locked the door behind them, and looked her dead in the eyes. "You're in way over your head, Calla. I got the same message you did, and I know who sent it." The room suddenly felt smaller. The air was thick with too many unanswered questions. Calla's mind raced back to the photograph, the missing note, the video clip with Ethan's voice laced in guilt. Now Liam, who had disappeared without a word all those years ago, was claiming to be caught in the same web. She wanted to believe it was a coincidence, that he was lying, playing some kind of twisted game. But when he pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket, identical in style and handwriting to the one she'd found weeks ago, she knew he was telling the truth. It wasn't just about her and Ethan anymore. Someone had been watching both of them, tracking their movements, following them for years. And for the first time, she realized this wasn't about a fake relationship gone real or a wealthy Sil hiding skeletons in his closet. This was something deeper, older, carefully orchestrated. Liam explained that he'd been working as a freelance tech investigator ever since leaving his job in cybersecurity. Ironically, at one of Ethan's former rival firms. He hadn't known Ethan personally, but he'd stumbled across the company's name while doing contract work for a government agency. Apparently, a shadow file tied to Ethan's empire had surfaced on the dark web, an encrypted database with no labels, no signatures, just layers of scrambled data and one untraceable IP address. The file was titled Project Calyx, and hidden within it were fragments of personal records, surveillance logs, and disturbing audio files, many of them involving people Ethan had either worked with, dated, or fired. including one that had Callah's name attached to it. Weeks before she ever met him, that was when Liam received his message. And that's when he knew this wasn't just about some ex-girlfriend drama or a business scandal. It was a long-term operation, and Callah had somehow been chosen. Just as she was beginning to absorb what Liam was saying, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from Ethan, but from someone she hadn't spoken to in months, her best friend, Tasha. The message was short and panicked. "Callah, are you okay? Some guy came to my job asking questions about you. Said he was vetting your security clearance. I told him to get lost, but he had pictures of us. I think something's wrong. Call me ASAP." That was it. No follow-up. No reply when Callah called back. Just silence. Her throat tightened. This was no longer isolated. Someone was reaching out to people close to her, pulling threads in every direction. And the more she tried to gather answers, the more chaos erupted around her. Who was behind this? And what did they want from her? Liam tried to convince her to leave the city with him, to disappear, to go dark, to stop digging before it got worse. But Callah couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when her best friend might be in danger. Not when her own name had been buried in a file connected to Ethan Long before they ever crossed paths. She had to find out what was going on, even if it meant facing the possibility that Ethan had known who she was from the beginning. But just as she was about to argue with Liam, a sharp knock rang out from the door. 3 short taps, 1 long pause, then 2 more. That rhythm. It was the same one she'd heard outside the bookstore. And whoever was on the other side of the door had followed her all the way back here. Liam motioned for silence, drawing a small blade from his coat. Callah had forgotten how paranoid he could be. But this time his instincts weren't off. A voice came through the door. Low, distorted, altered by some kind of tech device. "Open up. You're running out of time." No name, no explanation, just those words. The doorknob jiggled slightly. Not enough to break the lock, but enough to let them know whoever was out there was serious. Liam grabbed her arm and whispered that there was a back exit to the fire escape, and they didn't have time to wait. Callah hesitated. Part of her wanted to open the door, to confront the truth head-on, to stop running and demand answers. But the look in Liam's eyes told her this wasn't the time for bravery. They slipped out through the window, making their way down the fire escape into freezing air of the alley. Every shadow felt alive, every sound a threat. And when they reached the street, Liam led her to an old black SUV parked a few blocks down. Inside, he revealed something else, something that made her stomach twist into knots. He had one more copy of the surveillance footage from the flash drive, but his version had an extra minute at the end, a section that had been cut from the copy she received. And in that last minute, the camera tilted slightly to the side, revealing the person Ethan had been arguing with in the hotel room. It wasn't a board member. It wasn't a journalist. It wasn't even an investor. It was Zara, the very woman who'd claimed to protect Callah, who had handed her the manila envelope, who had warned her not to trust Ethan. Now, the entire narrative was spiraling out of control. Why had Zara lied? Was she working against Ethan, or with him? Had the entire encounter at the cafe been scripted? If she was in the room with Ethan, why did she pretend not to know what was going on? And most importantly, what exactly were they arguing about? Callah sat back in the SUV, her breath fogging up the glass as her world unraveled faster than she could process. Nothing made sense anymore. Everyone she thought she could trust was now a suspect. Every piece of evidence contradicted the last. And the one man she still wanted answers from was the only one she couldn't reach. But just as the car pulled away from the curb, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a voice message from Ethan, and as she pressed play, she heard his voice trembling like she'd never heard before. "Callah, if you're hearing this, it means they've already gotten to you, but you need to know the truth. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I never meant for you to get involved. There's something I have to show you. Meet me tomorrow. Alone." Then the message cut off. No location, no time, and no second chance. The sun had barely risen when Callah opened her eyes to a sharp noise in the distance. The SUV Liam had driven them in was parked deep in an industrial lot just outside Manhattan, Abandoned loading docks, rusted scaffolding, nothing but silence and shadows for miles. She dozed off for maybe an hour, her mind too overloaded to rest. And now something was wrong. Her body knew it before her brain did. Liam was gone, the driver's seat empty, his coat still slung over the steering wheel like he had left in a rush. But there were no keys, no note, no explanation. Just that thick, sinking silence, the kind that makes your skin crawl and your stomach knot. She called his name, first softly, then louder, stepping out of the SUV and onto the cold concrete. There was no answer, no movement, just the hum of the distant city skyline and the sound of her own breath, unsteady and unsure. Panic crept in slowly, like cold water rising around her feet. She checked her phone. No new messages, no return call from Tasha, and still nothing from Ethan beyond that broken voice message. She thought maybe Liam had gone to get coffee or check the perimeter, but something told her it wasn't that simple. Liam didn't just vanish. He was paranoid to a fault, always watching every corner, always 5 steps ahead. For him, to disappear like this, without a single trace, meant only one thing. Someone had gotten to him, and whoever was had done it so cleanly, so quickly, that it made her blood run cold. She rushed back into the SUV, searching the glove compartment, the back seat, the floor, anything that might tell her where he'd gone. That's when she noticed the missing flash drive, the one with the full video. Gone. Her hands started to shake. She couldn't breathe. It was happening again. Evidence disappearing, people vanishing, messages left incomplete. Like someone was sweeping the board, erasing all the pieces before she could figure out the game. Her thoughts spiraled fast and loud. What if Liam had been lying all along? What if he was part of it? What if this was all designed to trap her, feed her just enough fear, just enough truth to keep her chasing shadows? She didn't know who to believe anymore. Every instinct she had was colliding with every doubt. It felt like being hunted in slow motion, each hour closing in tighter, leaving her fewer ways out. By mid-morning, she made her way to the only safe place she could think of, her childhood friend's bookstore in Queens, long since closed but still accessible with an old spare key she kept on her necklace. Inside, it smelled like dust and memories, the shelves still half-stocked with forgotten novels and faded signs that once welcomed customers with cheerful quotes. She locked the door behind her, sat on the floor behind the register, and finally let the fear wash over her. Real, raw fear. Not the anxious, creeping kind she'd felt since Ethan first pulled her into his world, but the kind that settles deep into your bones and makes you question whether you'll survive what's coming next. She couldn't stop thinking about Tasha, her laugh, her stubborn loyalty, how she always showed up when no one else did. If someone had gone after her friend just to get to Calla, that was a line she couldn't unsee. She tried calling again, her fingers numb as they tapped the screen, but it went straight to voicemail. She texted, emailed, even sent a desperate voice message. Still nothing. That's when she checked her inbox and noticed something new, a message from a private, encrypted email server she didn't recognize. The subject line simply read, "You're looking in the wrong direction." Attached was a still image pulled from what looked like an internal security camera. It showed Calla at a cafe 2 weeks ago, sitting alone. But it wasn't the image that scared her. It was a reflection in the window behind her. A man in a hoodie, standing just outside, watching. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Liam. And it wasn't a stranger from the street. She'd seen that face once before, in a photo on Zara's desk. She stared at the image until her eyes burned, trying to understand how someone had been trailing her even before she knew she was in danger. Someone had planted themselves in the background of her life, invisible yet always near, watching, waiting, planning. The more she tried to remember that day, the more it twisted into something unrecognizable. Was she followed before Ethan ever offered her the fake date deal? Was this entire story not a spiral that began with him, but something she had unknowingly walked into long before? She had to get out. She had to find answers. But every option felt poisoned. Ethan was compromised, possibly lying. Liam was missing. Zara was now part of a secret meeting. She pretended not to remember. And someone was lurking in the shadows, close enough to photograph her, close enough to leave messages, close enough to make her disappear just like the others if she wasn't careful. Then came the sound that shattered the stillness, the creak of the front door. Slow, methodical, califroze. She hadn't heard anyone unlock it. Her heart pounded so violently she could hear in her ears. She reached for the bat she kept behind the register, her body trembling as footsteps moved across the wooden floor. And then a voice, one she didn't recognize, low and measured, male, spoke just loud enough for her to hear. You shouldn't have looked at that file. She didn't breathe. She didn't move. But when she finally peeked around the corner, the store was empty again. Only the door remained open, and on the floor beneath it, a photograph had been placed, one she hadn't seen before. It was of her. But this time, she wasn't alone. She was holding hands with Ethan. Only the photo had been taken 2 years ago, before they ever met, or so she thought. Calla stared at the photograph like it was a lie printed in ink. Her hand trembled as she picked it up from the dusty floor, heart stuttering, brain refusing to make sense of what she was seeing. It was unmistakably her. Same necklace, same crooked smile, even a small scar on her left wrist she got when she was 13. And there was Ethan, standing right beside her, fingers interlaced with hers, their faces turned toward the sun like two people caught in a moment of genuine happiness. But the timestamp printed in the corner? It was from 27 months ago, nearly a full year before she ever stepped foot in his office, before he ever offered her the deal, before she even knew his name. She backed up against the shelf, the weight of the truth crashing over her in waves that made it hard to breathe. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. The photo wasn't fake. It wasn't photoshopped. It was real, which meant Ethan had known her long before they ever met. The entire foundation of their relationship, every laugh, every fight, every quiet night when she thought he was finally being vulnerable, was built on something she didn't understand, something much darker. Panic set in fast. She pulled out her phone, frantically scrolling through old messages, old photos, trying to find something, anything, that would contradict what the photo suggested. But there was nothing. Her memory didn't fail her. She was certain of it. She had never met Ethan before that gala, never shaken his hand, never seen him in passing, never even followed his company before that night. So why was there proof that she had? And more importantly, why had he hidden it? Just then, her phone buzzed again, a private number flashing across the screen. Against her better judgment, she answered, and what came through chilled her to the core. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Zara. It wasn't even a voice she recognized. It was a recording, audio pulled from a surveillance feed. Her voice, days earlier, inside Ethan's apartment. I just want to know if I can trust you. His voice replied, soft but clipped. You already do. You just don't know it yet. The call cut off abruptly. But that one phrase, you already do, echoed in her mind like a riddle she'd missed the first time. Because trust wasn't something she gave easily. And now she realized maybe that's why Ethan hadn't waited for her to give it. Maybe he took it long before she even knew he existed. Still reeling, she made her way back to the SUV she'd abandoned earlier, praying for some piece of Liam's belongings left behind, some link to the puzzle that hadn't been erased. What she found instead, buried beneath the passenger seat, was a torn section of a printed email chain. It was barely legible, ink smudged from moisture, but one sentence stood out clearly enough to make her legs weaken beneath her. Subject: Operation Calyx Phase 2. Initiate relationship modeling for Subject CJ. She froze, staring at the letters. Subject CJ. That was her. Calla James. And relationship modeling? The words made her stomach turn. She had to read the sentence 3 more times before she let herself believe what it meant. She hadn't just been manipulated emotionally. She had been studied, targeted, programmed into someone's agenda, without ever knowing. All those coincidences, the near-perfect timing of Ethan's offer, the way he always seemed to say the right thing, calm her down at the exact moment she needed it. It hadn't been fate. It had been a script, and she'd been cast in a role without even auditioning. In a fit of disbelief, She did the one thing she swore she wouldn't. She called Zara. If anyone still had answers, even buried beneath layers of deceit, it was her. When the line finally connected, Zara didn't sound surprised to hear Callah's voice, just tired, maybe even relieved. "You found the photo, didn't you?" she asked, voice flat, like she had expected this moment all along. Callah didn't answer at first, but her silence was enough. Zara sighed. "I wasn't lying when I told you not to trust him, but I didn't tell you the whole truth either. You were part of a behavioral prototype. Callah, a beta project designed to test predictive emotional algorithms in real time. Ethan didn't just choose you. You were assigned to him." It felt like the ground opened beneath her. She gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to make sense of words that didn't belong in real life. "Assigned?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "To what?" "Be his emotional experiment." Zara didn't laugh. She didn't argue. "No," she said, "to make him human again." And that was when everything shifted. This wasn't just about her being watched. It wasn't just Ethan hiding something from her. He was being watched too. The voice message, the surveillance, the disappearances. They weren't just aimed at her. They were controlling him as well. That's why he looked exhausted in the last few days. Why he started acting distant. Why he told her in that clipped voice to stay put. Because maybe Ethan, the billionaire with the perfect smile and Lockhart, had started to feel something real. And maybe that the thing the program didn't account for was a real threat. Callah didn't know what terrified her more, that she had been part of a cold, tech-driven relationship experiment, or that somewhere along the line, the one thing meant to be fake became real. But before she could ask Zara anything else, the line went dead. And when she looked up from her phone, the man from the cafe window was standing on the opposite side of the street, watching her. Again, Callah's hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. Her eyes locked on the man across the street. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, motionless, face obscured by a hood and dark glasses, like a ghost observing his own creation. She could feel her pulse in her throat, loud and rapid, each beat screaming at her to get out of there. But she didn't move. Not yet, because she knew this wasn't some random stalker. He was connected. He was part of it. The algorithm, the surveillance, the missing people, the distorted truths. And something told her that if she ran now, she'd never get another chance to find out who he was or why he'd been watching her since the beginning. So she made the hardest decision in that moment. She stepped out of the SUV, heart racing, and walked toward him. She crossed the street with deliberate steps, slow and cautious, every nerve on edge, her mind screaming questions that had no answers. But just as she reached the other side, the man turned and disappeared into the alley like smoke curling into the night. She followed without thinking, her breath sharp in the cold air. But by the time she reached the narrow gap between buildings, he was gone. Only a folded paper lay on the ground in his place, weighted by a small piece of metal that looked like a broken piece of a phone chip. On the paper, just one sentence, written in shaky handwriting. "Meet me tonight. Come alone, or the next person to vanish will be her." There was no name, no address, just a GPS coordinate scrawled beneath it. She didn't need to guess who her was. Tasha, her oldest friend, the one person who had no part in any of this, and yet was now being used like a pawn on a board she never agreed to play on. Back in the car, tears blurred Callah's vision as she sat alone, suffocating under the weight of a choice no one should ever have to make. If she didn't show up alone, Tasha might die. But if she did go alone, there was no telling what would happen to her. She didn't trust Zara. Liam had disappeared without a trace. Ethan was hiding truths stacked so high that even his sincerity felt like manipulation now. And yet, somehow, they were all pieces of the same design. Some willing, some unaware, but none of them innocent. And the worst part? She still didn't know who was really pulling the strings. There was no villain in a black cape, no obvious enemy to point a finger at. Just shadows, voices, and coded threats buried in surveillance clips and staged photographs. She sat with it all, trying to breathe through the fear, when her phone finally lit up again. Ethan, this time a video call. Her hand hovered over the screen for a long moment before she answered. His face appeared, tired and unshaven, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in days. "Calla," he said, breathless, "please listen to me. I didn't know it would get this far. I thought I could keep you out of it." She cut him off, anger flaring through her chest. "Out of what? Being watched? Being lied to? Used like I'm part of some beta test you never told me about." Ethan's face twisted in something between guilt and helplessness. "I didn't know until it was too late. They sold me the system as a way to connect deeper, to build empathy into AI models. I was supposed to be the control, the emotionless variable. And you were the unpredictable element. They didn't tell me you were real, that your memories were real, that you were real." His words hit her like a punch to the gut. She didn't know what was worse, that he'd been used too, or that she had started to believe there might still be a version of him that truly cared. "So I was just an emotional stimulant," she said, her voice trembling. "An experiment to see if the billionaire robot could learn to feel something?" He leaned forward, eyes desperate. "Not anymore. Whatever it started as, it changed. I changed. That wasn't part of the program. And that's why they're shutting it down. You need to understand. If you go to that meeting tonight, you're walking into a trap. But if you don't, they'll go after Tasha. And after that, anyone else connected to you. That's how they keep us in line." Calla's head was spinning. Nothing felt solid anymore. Every layer she peeled back revealed another beneath it. Like a twisted Russian doll of betrayal and surveillance, and choices she didn't make but was forced to live with. Ethan's warning hung heavy in her mind, but so did the photo, the timestamp, the way he held her hand in it like it was something familiar, like they'd done it 100 times. How could she reconcile that version of him with the man on the screen now, begging her to stay away? Her instincts told her that the moment she decided what to do next, there would be no undoing it, no second chance, no safe option. She thought about Tasha, about Liam, about how easily people had been removed from this narrative when they asked the wrong questions. She thought about her younger self, working 2 jobs, dreaming of a life less ordinary, never imagining that love, trust, and identity would be tools in someone's tech prototype. She was done being used. But to end this, she had to walk right into the center of the storm, alone, vulnerable, with nothing left but her resolve. She ended the call without saying goodbye, staring at the GPS coordinates scribbled on the page. And in that moment, Calla James knew either she'd walk out tonight with the truth, or she wouldn't walk out at all. The cold wind ripped through the night as Calla followed the GPS coordinates toward the edge of a city, an abandoned shipping yard tucked just beyond the Hudson, where rusted containers lined the cracked pavement like forgotten relics. Her breath clouded in the air, heart hammering with every step she took. The silence around her amplified by the knowledge that every second counted. Tasha's life was a price hanging in the balance. There was no room left for caution, no time for second-guessing. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth anymore. This was survival. She moved quickly but carefully, glancing over her shoulder every few steps, her senses sharpened by adrenaline and dread. She was alone, or so she thought, when she reached a container marked in the coordinates. She found it cracked open, dim light spilling out through a narrow gap. Inside, she saw something that made her stomach turn. Rows of screens, all looping surveillance footage. Some of her, some of Ethan, some of other people she didn't recognize. A middle-aged woman in a grocery store. A young couple arguing on a street corner. A teenage boy sitting alone in a therapist's office. All of them watched, tracked, cataloged. Notes ran across the bottom of each feed. Emotional response, behavioral patterns, predictive reactions. A digital profile of people's most private moments, dissected like insects under a microscope. She stepped closer, horrified, realizing that what she thought had been a one-off experiment was part of something far bigger. This wasn't just about her and Ethan. It wasn't even just about Project Calyx. This was a full-scale behavioral prediction program, one designed to manipulate emotional decisions across real-world interactions. Real people, real lives. And then she heard footsteps behind her. She turned fast, heart in her throat, prepared to run, but stopped cold when she saw who it was. Zara. But this time, the polished PR queen was gone. No sharp heels, no expensive coat, just all black, hair pulled back, eyes hard. She didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She just looked at Calla with something between pity and finality. "You weren't supposed to make it this far," she said quietly. "You were supposed to walk away." Calla stepped back instinctively, rage and betrayal twisting in her chest. "You lied to me. You said you were trying to protect me." Zara exhaled like she'd heard that line too many times. "I was trying, but protection has a price, and you stopped paying attention to the rules." Then she pointed to the wall behind her, where another screen flickered to life, revealing a live feed of Tasha, blindfolded, hands tied, crying. The shot was inside what looked like a storage closet, the camera angle tilted slightly. But Calla could see the fear on her best friend's face with brutal clarity. Her body went ice cold. "Let her go," Calla snapped. "This has nothing to do with her." Zara shook her head slowly. "That's where you're wrong. It has everything to do with her. With you. With all of us. Do you think this program is just about emotions? About whether Ethan can fall in love?" Her voice rose, more bitter than angry. "This isn't about love. It's about control. This system, this technology, is the future of decision-making. Who people vote for, who they marry, when they panic, when they act, when they freeze. Your responses, your emotions, your bond with Ethan. It was all a data stream we could model. And now, it's almost ready for deployment." Calla felt sick. "You're building mind control." Zara's smile was tired. "We're building influence, the kind that governments and corporations dream about. Your connection with Ethan gave us data no simulation ever could, and then you broke the model by feeling too much. You were never supposed to matter, Calla, but now you do, and that makes you dangerous." In that moment, something shifted inside her. All the fear, the heartbreak, the confusion. It burned into something sharper. Calla stepped forward, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "You're not going to hurt her, because if you do, I'll burn this whole thing to ground. I've seen your files. I know how much you've invested. You think you're in control, but people like me? We break systems like yours from the inside." Zara tilted her head, amused but not impressed. "You think you have leverage? You're standing inside a data farm with no exit, no backup, and no one left who trusts you." But she was wrong, because just then, another voice crackled through the intercom. It was Ethan. "Zara, shut it down. She's not part of the control anymore. She's not yours to model." The screens glitched. Zara's eyes widened. Somewhere in the system, Ethan had breached their firewall. "Calla, go left, door by the red shipping bin. I bought you 60 seconds, his voice said. Zara lunged toward her, but Calla didn't hesitate. She bolted through the open space, ducking under cables, sliding past metal crates as alarms began to wail. Red lights flooded the container walls, blinking warnings overhead as security protocols activated. She followed Ethan's directions blindly, heart hammering. Every second stretched into a lifetime. Behind her, the monitors flickered and died, sparks flying from the panels as Zara screamed into her radio. "Get her back! She can't leave this site." Calla crashed through the final door, her legs nearly giving out beneath her. There, at the end of the narrow corridor, a small service van waited, its back door open. Liam was behind the wheel, alive, bleeding from a wound on his forehead, but grinning like hell. "Took you long enough," he muttered as she jumped in. The van sped off into the darkness, tires screeching against gravel as the facility erupted into chaos behind them. Calla collapsed in the back seat, gasping, hands shaking, adrenaline blurring her thoughts. It wasn't over, not even close. But now she knew the truth. The conspiracy wasn't just some twisted romance experiment. It was a global test run, and she had been the blueprint. And someone somewhere had just decided she was the biggest threat they couldn't control. The sky was still dark when the van finally pulled into a hidden service tunnel beneath an old commuter rail yard on the outskirts of the city. The kind of place that never showed up on Google Maps, where signals dropped and shadows seemed to linger longer than they should. Calla could barely move, every muscle in her body wired with adrenaline and dread. Liam shut off the engine and turned to her, his face worn, blood caked in his hair, eyes hollow from everything they'd been through. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is where it ends." She nodded, but the weight in her chest made it hard to breathe, because she wasn't just walking into a final confrontation. She was walking into the heart of the lie, into the control room where her life had been scripted like some viral social experiment. She wasn't sure she was ready to face the people who had played God with her emotions, her memories, her identity. But she also knew she couldn't keep running. They entered through a steel door disguised as a maintenance hatch, descending a spiral staircase that led into a dimly lit underground facility. The walls were lined with servers humming low, their blinking lights casting shadows that moved like ghosts. Surveillance screens glowed along the far wall, live feeds of city streets, apartment windows, hospital rooms. Dozens of lives, monitored in real time. She wanted to look away, but her eyes caught one screen in particular. It showed her mother's house. Her mother, standing in the kitchen, unaware she was being watched. The fury that rose in her chest was blinding. Then, from behind a thick glass panel, a voice echoed across the space. "You were never supposed to see this." It was him. The man from the photo, from the alley, from the surveillance stills, the architect behind everything. Not Ethan, not Zara, but the one pulling their strings. He stepped into view slowly, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit clean-cut, with eyes so calm it was terrifying. "You're remarkable, Calla," he said, almost tenderly. "You survived every phase, defied every model. You created chaos in a system built to predict order. That makes you the most valuable subject we've ever had." She stepped forward, her voice a low growl. "You kidnapped my friend. You erased parts of my life. You used me." He smiled faintly. "No, we revealed you. We took the distractions away. The lies you tell yourself. The fantasy of choice. We showed you who you really are." Liam pulled a flash drive from his jacket, tossing it across the floor. "She knows everything. Every line of code. Every hidden server. We got enough to burn this whole thing to the ground." The man didn't flinch. "You think this is the only lab? That this is the center of the operation? Project Calyx is one node, one arm of a global structure. Shut this down, and 10 more will bloom in its place." Calla stepped up beside Liam, her voice shaking but steady. "Then we'll start with you." That's when the lights cut out. Everything plunged into blackness. Power gone. Backup systems failing one by one. A moment later, emergency lights flickered on, red and pulsing like a heartbeat. The screens blinked static. The man was gone from behind the glass. A voice crackled through the PA system, initiating purge protocol, erasing logs, terminating active experiments. Calla's eyes went wide. He's wiping the system. He's going to kill Tasha. She ran to the maze of corridors, following the map Liam had memorized earlier, heart slamming against her ribs like a drum. Alarms screamed overhead. Water began to pour from ceiling vents, some kind of automated fire suppression system designed to destroy servers under emergency conditions. Doors slammed shut around them, one after another, and just as they reached the last hallway, they found her. Tasha, bound to a chair, a countdown flashing red on the wall behind her. 2 minutes and 17 seconds. 2 minutes and 17 seconds until the gas release. Liam started working on the panel, cursing under his breath as he tried to override the lock. Calla ran to Tasha, pulling the blindfold off, her friend gasping in relief and terror. "You came," Tasha whispered. "I didn't think you'd make it." "I always come," Calla said, choking on her words, tears mixing with the sweat on her face. "I'm sorry you ever got dragged into this." Liam shouted behind them, 90 seconds left. Then came the final twist, spoken in a low, broken voice that made Calla freeze. "He knew you would save her." She turned around. It was Ethan, bloody, limping, but alive, stepping into the corridor with a small device in his hand. Calla's knees nearly buckled. "You were working with him?" He shook his head, eyes red. "I didn't know at first, but I've been feeding you clues. Every breadcrumb, every leak. It was me. I couldn't stop the program from starting, but I could make sure you ended it." Calla stared at him, disbelief and betrayal crashing into her at once. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? His voice cracked. Because if I had, you wouldn't have believed me. You had to live it, feel it, break free from it on your own. That was the only way the data would be real. The only way they'd believe it. The countdown hit 39 seconds. Liam finally cracked the panel. Wires sparking as the door lock disengaged. Calla grabbed Tasha, pulling her free as Ethan pressed a device into her palm. It's the kill switch. It'll destroy every trace of Project Calyx in the network. But once you use it, I'm gone too. I was a final node. Her breath caught. You'll die? He nodded. They won't let me walk away. I'd rather go out helping you shut it all down. She stared at the device, hands trembling. 30 seconds left. And in that moment, every part of her life collided. Love, lies, data, design. She looked him in the eyes, searching for the man she thought she knew. Maybe he was never real. Or maybe he was the only real thing in the entire simulation. She made her choice. The button clicked. Everything stopped. The lights died. The alarms went silent. And then the whole facility went dark. Servers fried, files erased, screens blank. She didn't even know if Ethan was still breathing when they pulled her into the night. But she knew it was over. Or so she thought. Because hours later, in the back of an unmarked black car speeding through downtown, Tasha pulled something from her pocket. A second drive. One Ethan never gave her. One he never told her he had. And as she handed it to Calla, she whispered, "He left this for you. Said if anything happens, you want to know the real reason you were chosen." Calla stared down at it. Her reflection caught in the silver surface. And for the first time, she wasn't sure she wanted the answer. The weeks that followed felt like both a blur and a slow motion unraveling. After the destruction of the facility and the shutdown of Project Calyx, Calla found herself in a strange kind of limbo. Physically free, but emotionally shackled to everything she'd learned. She and Tasha stayed hidden for a while, bouncing between safe houses provided by a whistleblower network Liam had once worked with, watching the world go on as if nothing had happened. No headlines. No FBI raids. No public reckoning. The conspiracy that nearly broke her life disappeared without a trace, just like Ethan had said it would. And in that silence, something even more unsettling bloomed, an understanding that this wasn't some grand victory, that the most powerful systems never collapse loudly. They slip into the shadows, wait for the next opportunity, and start again. It wasn't over because Calla beat it. It was over because they let it be, for now. But some truths don't stay buried forever. One morning, tucked inside a padded envelope slid under their motel door, Calla received a copy of the flash drive Ethan left behind. The one Tasha had carried with her like a ghost clinging to memory. It took her 3 days to finally open it. She sat alone in a quiet cabin miles from the city, the trees whispering against the windows as her laptop flickered to life. The files were encrypted, but the key was a simple password, her birthday. Not the date she'd always celebrated, but the one she discovered buried deep in Calyx's records, the day they had marked her profile as activated. That detail alone told her the truth had been manipulated for far longer than she thought. When the files opened, she didn't find blueprints or databases. What she found was worse. Video logs. Hundreds of hours of surveillance. Not just her, but of people she crossed paths with for years. Conversations she thought were private. Moments she believed were hers. And at the center of it all was a folder labeled simply Echo. Inside that folder was a file that changed everything. It was a recorded conversation between Ethan and a woman she didn't recognize at first. But the voice, it was her mother's. The same warm tone she remembered from childhood, only younger, stronger. It was from 25 years ago. And what she said made Calla freeze. She can't stay with me. I've already made a deal. She'll be safe with them. They promised. And if it means she gets a better life, real opportunities, then I have to do this. I have to believe this isn't a mistake. Her mother had given her up, not out of desperation, but through a contract. Project Calyx hadn't started last year. It had started when Calla was a child. She hadn't been recruited. She had been born into it. Selected, groomed, raised under the illusion of normalcy, while every moment was cataloged and modeled. The gala where she met Ethan, the job offer, the entire romance, none of it was accidental. The entire arc of her adult life had been guided by invisible hands. Ethan might have loved her, in his own fractured way, but even he was acting from a blueprint he'd never seen until it was too late. And now, Calla understood the final cruelty of it all. She wasn't the glitch in the system. They had designed her to be the anomaly. They had needed someone who would rebel, someone who would fight, so they could study the limits of autonomy, emotion, resistance. Calla sat with that truth for hours, tears long dried on her cheeks, as the sun set outside. And then, slowly, she packed up the laptop, pulled on her coat, and stepped into the chill of the evening. She didn't destroy the flash drive. She didn't leak it. She hid it. Somewhere no one could find it. Somewhere it would survive even if she didn't. Because one day, someone else would need it. Someone who realized their life wasn't entirely their own. Someone who asked the right questions. And when they did, she wanted them to have what she never did: proof. A few days later, she boarded a train with no destination. Just her, a duffel bag, and a new name stitched into a passport she hadn't asked for, but now had to use. She didn't say goodbye to Tasha. Not really. Just left a note that read, "This time, I choose who I become." It wasn't closure. It wasn't peace. But it was power, finally. She could never get back what they took. She could rewind time or reclaim the girl who once believed in love as something spontaneous and pure. But she could make sure no one used her again. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to keep going. In the reflection of the train window, as the landscape blurred into night, she thought she saw Ethan's face for a moment. Not real, just memory. And it didn't bring pain this time, only a strange sense of gratitude. Because even if everything was engineered, even if their love was sparked by design, what grew between them had been chosen in the end. That choice was real, and maybe that meant something. But just as she closed her eyes, trying to let the weight of the past go, her phone buzzed. A new message. No number. No ID. Only 5 words. Phase 3 has begun. Run. And with that, Calla opened her eyes wide, breath catching in her throat. Not in fear, but in recognition. Because now, she was ready. And this time, she wouldn't run. She would lead.